Pardon me while I have a strange interlude.
There is nothing else. Life is an obscure hobo bumming a ride on the omnibus of art.
Along the misty corridors of time, and in those corridors I see figures, strange figures.
Welcome back, my friends, to the AP Strange Show. I am your host, AP Strange. This is my show, and this right now is our imaginary sponsor for today, which is Dr. Logan's Cognitive Behavioral Therapy Clinic for the Undead. If you're surrounded by the undead, you most likely will not be able to kill them all, and you may not have a place to go, so you might as well teach them how to behave. And Dr. Logan has a tried and trusted method for making that happen. So enroll your zombies in the school of Dr. Logan and his clinic for cognitive behavioral therapy for the undead. And tonight on the show, we're doing a Third Time's the Charm movie episode. This one going back to 1985, and the movie in question is Day of the Dead, which is the third of the George Romero zombie movies following the Dawn of the Dead, which followed the Night of the Living Dead, of course. And here to talk about it with me is a man I've known for quite a while. We've kind of we've been moots on the internet for different ways, shape, or form. We met up in Exeter, New Hampshire at the UFO festival once, and paid our respects to Betty and Barney Hill. That was cool. But he is the co-host of Bring Me the Axe, which is a wonderful podcast about horror movies, and 99-Cent Rental, which also covers a lot of horror movies, but mostly just like trash movies that you find on the shelves back in the day, and Radio Free Haddonfield, which is a really cool music show. My guest tonight, welcome to the show, Bryan White.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Of course, man.
Yeah. Yeah, that's quite an introduction there. I got a lot going on.
Yeah, you're a busy man. Yeah. When I became aware of Bring Me the Axe, I checked it out, and I'm like, oh, there's a whole other show too. And then you've been doing the music for a long time, though. The music show has been.
No, the music show is actually just part of our Patreon
okay.
like offerings, because we've got a couple of things that we do over there. Radio Free Haddonfield is it's like an hour-long like music and chatter, like a DJ show. And then the other one that we do for it, like when we do it like we do with Bring Me the Axe and 99-Cent Rental, where it's like when that one is off the week that's off, we've got an X-Files rewatch show called Do You Think I'm Spooky? That is on.
Oh.
And yeah, that's like 50% us talking about the X-Files, and then like 50% us talking about what happened on that day in history. Because as it happens, the 90s was a really, really weird decade.
It really was. Yeah, and it's a lot of stuff that you might forget about. And then as soon as you remember, you're like, yeah, that was pretty weird, huh?
Yeah, like one of the things that we just talked about, we did the episode Space just recently, which is such a dog. It's like one of the series' worst. But on the week that it was off, there was a report that Dave turned up about a cult in Ukraine that was arrested at the time. I'm not really sure what they were arrested for, but they arrested 150 members of a cult called the Great White Brotherhood. And we couldn't find out like anything really about them, because anybody who's like, I'm sure people who listen to this podcast know that like that covers the Great White Brotherhood covers a lot of weirdness, and like
right.
You just never know what you're going to get when you search.
Yeah. It's probably not all related to each other. Really,
no, because like it's all part of like theosophy, and then like I Am Activity, which is like also kind of theosophical. But it's like it's tied up in so much of that like secret chiefs, ascended masters stuff. Like Aleister Crowley was always writing about the White Lodge and the Black Lodge, that sort of thing. So like you never know what you're gonna find. But that's a really weird story. And then when they were arrested, none of them would talk to the authorities. They all just maintained this stoic code of silence.
Huh. So I guess nobody knows.
Nobody knows. I mean, I'm sure somebody knows. We just didn't look
Right.
that deep, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So, since you mentioned it, space, is that the one where there was like a frozen organism in the ice and it
No,
gets
that's
released?
that's that one's actually called Ice. That's the one that I believe
Oh,
actually is the episode before Space.
okay.
It's like this run of X-Files episodes in the first season where there's just like one word because there's ice, there's space, there's fire, which is coming up.
Hmm.
Conduit was another episode we did recently. No, that episode Ice is essentially it's the one that I think that's Morgan and Wong who wrote it, and just an egregious ripoff of The Thing,
Okay.
but it's a great
Yeah.
episode.
So that one and ice just kind of bleed together in my memory, I guess, because I don't revisit the first season all that often. It's
Oh, I
kind
don't
of,
blame you. I don't blame you. We're really going through it because that's a show that like we both have very, very fond memories of. Everybody does. It's one of the greatest science fiction, like maybe one of the greatest television shows of all time. But man,
yeah, I agree.
what a wobbly first season it was. Like it really doesn't pick. That show doesn't really pick up until season 2. And Space is the one that's about he's an astronaut who comes back to Earth, essentially kind of possessed by a Mars ghost or something. It's a
Oh,
really really
yeah.
strange. It's mostly a bottle episode that takes place. It's sort of like NASA mission control. It's
Okay.
really really bad. It is an episode. It was the very first episode of the show that I ever saw, and I disliked it so much that I didn't get back to the X-Files until the season 2 finale when I was like, oh shit, that's actually a really good show.
Hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I mean, Tombs is first season, right? Feel like it kind of picks up a little bit when you get to
That
Tombs.
one, that show. Oh boy, that episode really kind of is a real early one. It's
Right.
I think it's episode 3 or 4. So like they
Okay.
had a real home run like right out of the gate. Like the first couple of
Right.
episodes of the show are really good, and then it just kind of cools and coasts for a while. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, but
Yeah, and
we
it
have
took
an
a while for Mulder and Scully to kind of build that dynamic that you end up loving them for. It's really
yeah,
well
well,
into
what we're
season 2.
finding is
Yeah.
they had great chemistry like right off the bat. Like they just worked.
Yeah.
It definitely it took writers a little while to kind of figure out what that is, but just David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson just ruled together immediately. Like they just jived.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I just kind of felt like they didn't write them terribly consistently at first.
Sure. Yeah, because like that
'Cause-
episode in particular Space is like a complete contradiction of all the episodes that have featured both of them
yeah.
before. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a rough watch. That episode is just so fucking bad. But it's followed by an episode called Fallen Angel, which is really where things start to pick up. That's a great one right there. That episode is going to be coming out in our Patreon feed next week.
Hmm. Okay. Well, I'll be interested when you get to season, I think 3, because there's an episode that takes place in my hometown.
Oh, no
Uh,
kidding.
Excelsis Day, the one with the old folks home. And
Oh,
there's like
yeah.
this,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that takes place in Worcester. I
That's
remember
great.
seeing that as a kid. I like seeing Worcester, Massachusetts, and the little type on the side. My brother and I like lost our minds.
Yeah, I think what's the one? There's the one with the I believe the Satanic School Board one. It's the hand that hurts is what it is, but the title of
Yeah,
the
it's in
episode is
German.
actually in German, and that
Yeah,
one takes place in New Hampshire, and that was the one
it
where I was
does.
like,
Yep.
yes, that's my hometown, that's my turf.
And that's a fantastic episode.
That's a great one too. Yeah.
Yeah. But we can't get too sidetracked on X-Files here. We
Oh
could
yeah,
literally talk
let's
about
not get in the
X-Files for an
get too
hour.
deep in the weeds there, man. We'll be talking about that all night.
Because we have zombies to talk about.
Yes, we
And,
do.
When I pitched this movie to you as one we could talk about, it seemed like you were more than eager to do it because you said this was one of your favorites.
Yeah. Oh, this is my favorite of the Romero zombie movies.
Okay.
Yeah. It
All right.
also happens to be George Romero's favorite of the zombie movies that he made also.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting because it seemed like from the limited amount of research that I do, and for listeners, if you listen to Bring Me the Axe, like Brian and his brother Dave, they get really deep into the research for the movies. So mine is pretty minimal in comparison, but what I came across was that Romero had wanted this movie to be the Gone with the Wind of zombie films. And it took
Yes.
me a while to figure out what that could possibly mean. And then, I think this morning I was like, oh, of course, he just means he wanted it to be like the classic zombie
Yeah, he
movie.
wanted it to be like grand in scope and very, very
Right.
big, and like that was the whole thing. You can find the original, like I don't think it's the first draft, but I believe the second draft of his original script is out there on the internet. You might even be able to read it at archive.org, but it is a way different movie than what we get. What we get is great. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's driven by like wild characters and like very silly dialogue and extraordinarily gross special effects.
Yeah.
But the original idea for this movie was it took place like in a jungle, in a sort of similar situation where this whole zombie thing is like well and fully out of hand, and there's like really no coming back from it. And a bunch of scientists live in this compound that's like surrounded by an electric fence. And of course, there's zombies all over the place. And there's a sort of like military guard that was assigned to them to sort of protect them, but they live in this like bunker underneath the laboratory. And it's this, it's the same sort of kind of political dynamic in the movie that we do have, where it's, they neither side is really talking to each other. The scientists are trying to figure out a way to kind of live in the situation that they've got, while the military just wants to obliterate everything. And so that's where the sort of dramatic tension lies. But what they're doing, in what the scientists have done, is they've essentially like trained and domesticated a large group of zombies. And I believe the way that it works is they only attack people and other zombies if the target is not wearing a certain kind of like a colored vest. I think is how they sort of differentiate friend from foe. And like that was the original idea. But the company that distributes it, United Film Distribution Company, I think it's called. We're like, okay, well, this is great. We'll give you $7 million, which, that's a significant budget for George Romero. And he was like, and they were like, the only thing that we want is it's got to have an R rating. And he was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I don't know if you know this about me. I don't do rated movies. And they were like, fine, we'll give you 3.5 million. And he was like, all right, fine, I'll do that.
Right. So then he had to pare it down as well, right?
Yeah. And so what we get is this, like, it's just this kind of, it's almost like a prolonged bottle episode. Like most of this movie takes place just in this like a couple of rooms in what's supposed to be like a military compound.
Yeah.
But
yeah, it seems like they had like one set and they used a lot of their budget on the opening scene where they go into the city in a helicopter.
Right. Right, because that's God, what is that? That's Sarasota. It's somewhere. Sure. It's somewhere down there. It's a major city in Florida that they cleared the streets and they trashed it up to make it look like the end of the world had happened. So like, yeah, a lot of money went to that scene, and it's very impressive. It's
good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something.
Yeah.
But yeah, like this movie in particular, like I might have been like 13 when I saw it the first time, and we had just seen Dawn of the Dead as well. And so like we were kind of ripping through it. And I don't think we'd even like seen Night of the Living Dead at that point, but or I had when I was much younger, and I didn't put it all together that these were all sort of connected in any sort of meaningful way.
Yeah.
But
because they're not really like sequels in the sense that you have a continuing character or anything like that. They just all kind of exist theoretically in the same universe,
Right. Like, really the only sort of consistent character are the zombies, and the fact that like the world is kind of gradually coming to an end.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that the original three, Night of the Living Dead.
Oh yeah, there's only three. There's no other sequels after this one.
Okay. Well,
I don't care what reality tells you. There's no other sequels after this one. There's no Land of the Dead. There's no Survival of the Dead.
But what about Return of the Living Dead? That's a whole different thing. But
yeah, so that Return of the Living Dead came out the same year, I believe a few months prior to this, and that one is not really a sequel. It's
Right, I know. It's a whole different animal.
so,
So
well, kind of. It's John Russo, who was Romero's producer on Night of the Living Dead, had because of the sort of weird copyright situation that sort of fell on Night of the Living Dead upon its release, where it fell into the public domain immediately. He had, I believe, had written a book that was like a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead, and and then eventually he was like, well, fuck it, I'm just going to make this movie. And so that's what they did with that one, which is why they say in that one, he's like, when James Karen is talking to, fuck no, this is Tommy. That's his name in Friday the 13th. But he's telling him, he's like, have you ever seen that movie, Night of the Living Dead? Like it's supposed to sort of tie the two of them together. I mean, obviously they're not. There's no continuity between the two of them except for the zombies. But it's sort of like it was definitely intended to be like, hey, remember that other movie?
yeah, but it was also tongue in cheek and like punk rock and
Oh yeah, that one's very funny. I fucking adore that movie too. Like I have a hard time sort of deciding which one I like better, like this Day of the Dead or Return of the Living Dead. I think Return of the Living Dead sort of ekes it out a little bit. In the end, and I would prefer to watch that one just because it's got a really wicked sense of humor and the music is so good in it.
Oh yeah, you got the Cramps.
The zombie makeup is incredible. Oh yeah, you got 45 Grave on the soundtrack. We got Flesh Eaters. It's such a good goddamn soundtrack.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, but I like them both for their own merits, because speaking of soundtracks, like Day of the Dead has that really great classic like synthy soundtrack with some like guitar work going on.
Yeah, it's the thing is like coming off this is compared to Dawn of the Dead, which has a soundtrack by Goblin, which is that Italian progressive rock, did all of like Argento's movies and stuff like that. This one is way more subdued, a little more laid back.
Mm-hmm.
Was it God, who's the guy who did it? It was, I got a note here about it. Oh, it's a guy named John Harrison who did it.
Okay.
He also did the soundtrack for Creepshow.
All right.
He's a man of many talents. It turns out, like I found out that like apart from just like providing the soundtracks to these Romero movies, he also directed those Dune miniseries for the Sci-Fi Channel.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, like the soundtrack is definitely all right as far as I'm concerned. It's perfectly suitable. I like it on its own, but I don't really find myself going back. And I listen to a lot of film music too, but I don't really go back to this one terribly often.
Well, it's a vibe. Is kind of the way I would put it. It's like
yeah.
It doesn't always match the energy of the scene, which is kind of
the closing
unsettling.
Yeah, the closing sound, like the closing song during the credits has lyrics and stuff. It's wild. And it's kind of a love song too, which is even funnier.
Well, it's a happy ending. Spoiler alert. So
yeah.
The way I like to think about the original trilogy though, is that you have three different templates for a zombie movie. Because I think Night of the Living Dead is the most common one you'll ever see with zombie movies, where the movie begins before the outbreak does. Right?
Yeah. So it's like as it's happening, like that one really drops you into it. And as it turns out, it's been a couple of weeks since there's been these like strange murders, and then like as the movie starts, it's starting to reach like a fever pitch.
Right. Yeah. But you see the characters start to like notice it, and you follow one character, and all of a sudden there's zombies everywhere.
Yeah.
But Dawn of the Dead is a totally different template where it's the escapees have holed up somewhere. I think this is a different kind of zombie movie where
like each one of these is like a template for like an entire subgenre of zombie movies. Like these, obviously before Night of the Living Dead, there hadn't really ever been anything like this. There'd been zombie movies, but not like this. They always handled them a little bit differently. They were more like voodoo zombies is kind of how it is. But like
White Zombie.
Yeah, like I Walked with a Zombie, like that's sort of stuff, that Jacques Tourneur stuff. But yeah, like Night of the Living Dead is the one where like, it's the template for like this is starting to happen and become a problem. And then
Right.
Dawn of the Dead is the template for the survivors trying to make a thing of it.
Right. And I think Day of the Dead is a template. That's a really rare one, but I swear there's other movies like this, and I think you see it a bit in The Walking Dead, which is just kind of like old organizational powers trying to hold on to that, like kind of like a military kind of bunker
The
situation.
trope is we're our own worst enemies.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
right.
Because that's really where what The Walking Dead comes up, where it's like the zombies. People always getting bitten and ripped apart on that show, but like really,
Right.
the problem are other groups of survivors.
Yeah.
Or 28 Days Later did something very similar, which I feel is like really, really close to this movie, where it's like our protectors are ultimately going to turn on us.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I did like that because, like we already established talking about the original script, this is an underground military base, and it's it made me think of like deep underground military bases and UFO
Right.
lore.
Yeah. Yeah. The what is it? The I think it's supposed to be like a nuclear missile base.
Right.
Because at least I believe the location that they use for that elevator in it
Mhm.
is an actual Nike missile base, like a Nike missile elevator from what they found down in Florida. Like these were missiles that were actually pointed at Cuba at one point.
Right. Yeah. 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 So it was a real military base in Cuba somewhere that's attached to some kind of cavern system.
Mhm. Yeah, which is actually located in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, which is why, like, when you see them like running through the halls and stuff like that, you see like boats and RVs just like parked there, because like what that was it was a storage space in a limestone mine in Pencil, near not Philadelphia, the other one, Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. Yeah. Yep. I feel like I've been to some of those caverns before out
Yeah.
in Pennsylvania. Yeah, yeah. I don't remember what they were called though. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a cool setup, and I think you had mentioned this already. The way that everybody acts, I think like everybody's really heightened up, and they're all angry at each other all of the time.
Right, but
Like,
like to a cartoonish degree.
right.
We've got Lori Cardeal, who's playing the lead, and she's
Hmm.
actually the daughter of Bill Cardeal, who in
Yep.
Night of the Living Dead is the newsman who's on the ground with like the
Yep.
sheriff and his guys.
Chilly Billy, they
Chilly
called
Billy.
him on the radio.
Yeah, he had a horror. He was a horror host.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
quite like Sven Gulli or anything like that. Like he didn't have a character. He was just himself. But yeah,
Right.
he was a Pittsburgh area horror movie host at the time when they made that movie. And yeah, his daughter ends up in one of Romero's movies as well.
Yep.
Uh, Joe Pilato as Captain Rhodes is like an all timer for me. I met him at they used to do it. They actually used to do the Rock and Shock Horror Con in Worcester.
Right. I remember
And
that.
and
Yep.
I went to not the first one. I went to the second one, and it was him, and like Laurie was there, and so Gary Clark, the guy who plays Steel, was there, and they had him at a little table. And I would walk through every now and then, like, because they're there signing autographs and stuff like that. And I would walk by their table, and occasionally he would like stand up and start doing scenes from the movie with them, very very loudly. It was awesome. Also, he was very very drunk, but it was fantastic. Like it was. Turned around and he did the like I'm running this monkey farm Frankenstein part.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was great.
But
I
he hadn't
actually
been in very many things prior to this, I don't think,
no,
right? Like,
he's in a deleted scene from Dawn of the Dead, and he's in Night Riders, which I
yeah,
believe is the movie. No, it was not the one that came out, because he'd done a few. Romero had made a few movies prior to this, but yeah, he did Night Riders. I think that's 1981. But yeah, other than that, yeah, he wasn't in much. I think he's done some television, but
it looked like voice acting. He did a lot of voice acting after this for
yeah,
like strange action centered cartoon shows and things like that. So,
yeah, that makes
um,
sense.
yeah, but I mean, yeah, every line of his is classic. Like,
It's like, yeah, everybody else is like acting at like a nice even 5, and he is at an 11, and he rips the knob off, so you can't bring him down.
Right. Yeah, I'm running this monkey farm, Frankenstein. Like, I want to know what you got going on in there. He's just
Yeah.
like
Are we
always
just
yelling.
jerking each other off? Yeah, his manner is just so intense. It must have been so much fun to play that character.
Yeah, it's just like wild-eyed and sneering the whole time, like a complete lunatic.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and Laurie Cardeal's character there is no nonsense, and she's
Oh, she's
really,
all she's all business. Yeah.
yeah, but to the point where it becomes absurd because it's like you could just relax too.
Well, I mean, to her credit, she is like the only woman in a military installation that is just full of men on the edge.
Yeah, yeah, because you have Steele and like his buddy
Yeah, him and Rickles are
Rickles. Yeah,
Rickles is also out of control in that entire movie. Like right up to the point where his whole thing is he is like the snickering, like laughing hyena through the thing, all the way up to his death.
yeah, he laughs all the way through his death.
Yeah.
But
That guy,
he's
and
just
he is acting the shit out of that part too. Like everything he does is just swinging for the fences, playing it for the back row. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and he looks like the bass player from like a thrash band in the '80s too, which is
right.
his whole thing. He is such a wild character.
Yeah, and I mean those two guys, Steele and Rickles, are just kind of pretty much nobody else in that unit. Do you even get lines from? You don't
Oh
even
yeah,
really.
yeah. Every now there's the I think the only other character who we get a name from is Torres, who's like the guy who gets his head ripped off at the end.
Yeah,
But most of them are just like nameless soldiers.
right.
You
Yeah,
know, the only
they're
one
all
that
just
ever really sticks out to me is Greg Nicotero. Is the one of these soldiers just because he did special effects on it, and then of course he went on to become Greg Nicotero. So
yeah, yeah. I mean, I was gonna mention that earlier because we mentioned The Walking Dead, so of course,
yeah, we're
yeah,
coming full circle.
Nicotero's in this, and I think he gets his head entirely pulled off at one point.
He gets shot. He's the one. He's the one. He gets shot when the zombie gets loose. Um, when they're trying to bring it out of the pen,
Hmm.
and the one that gets loose, he bites the guy with the machine gun who sprays him with bullets, and so he dies. And then he's the one who oh yeah, he's the one that Logan like cuts the head
Yeah,
off to see if it remains like active and stuff. That's
right.
a cool
Yeah,
scene too. Yeah,
yeah. So he has the head just separated, sitting on a
that's
tray.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, and I mean, which is just a long running interest of mine. And listeners, if you haven't already, you can check out my blog and find a post about head transplant movies. Uh, I have a pretty comprehensive list on there for anybody interested. But um, yeah, so I guess the whole thing with this, and who we haven't mentioned yet, is Dr. Logan, also known as Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Um, So I mean, the whole premise and his whole idea, the whole scientific endeavor here, is that Dr. Logan thinks if we can change the behavior of the zombies so that they don't want to kill you and eat you, it's a lot more. It might be a better way to go than trying to kill them or just trying to get away from them.
Yeah, and
So
he's such a wild character as well, like because he's our stock standard like mad scientist. He's been driven mad by the situation. He's driven entirely by data and logic. And he seems to be, in spite of the fact that his idea is completely insane, he's the only person who really seems to have grasped the gravity of their situation.
right,
Because like the other scientists are trying to find a way to sort of reverse whatever is happening. They want like, I don't know, a vaccine or something like that. And he's the one who's just like, no, 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 no. This we are fucked. This is it. The only way to like to exist in this world is to somehow find a way to coexist with these
right,
things that exist solely to eat us.
yeah.
And
I, for one, welcome our zombie overlords.
right, right. Because at one point when he comes into the mess hall as they're all meeting, and he's like,
Covered in blood.
Yeah. Oh God, he's constantly gory and mess. His hair's a fucking mess. But he walks in. He's like, by my calculations, they outnumber us 400,000 to 1, which is
Yeah.
significant. I did the math once. I was like, I wonder what that is. So I like looked up the world, like the estimated world population in 1985, and I did that. I did that math, and if like, I mean, honestly, who knows where he got where he got that number from? But that would put the number of like global survivors at somewhere about 10,000.
Wow.
Yeah. So like,
Yeah.
if he's right, then like they're completely screwed. Like there are literally billions of zombies out there.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
And I mean,
logically, the only thing to do is to sort of train them like dogs.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah. It sort of makes sense, but like how the logistics of it are like, well,
the
how though?
scale is right. I mean, that's where it all breaks down. Is like his plan works, but it works on one zombie. You know,
Right.
and the rest of them seem to show some kind of potential. But we've got Bub who knows what kind of effort it was to get him to that state.
Hmm.
But if that's Logan's plan, like, I mean, it works, but Jesus Christ, will it work at scale? Because you've got to be able to ramp this shit up fast.
Yeah. Right. Unless you can get one zombie really well trained to go out and then train the other zombies.
Right,
Just have it spread like a virus through all
right,
the
right. At
zombies.
first, we'll have one monkey butler, but then he'll train the others, and they'll regale us with tales of the forest.
Yeah. But that actor is great. Richard Liberty, I guess his
Richard
name
Liberty,
is.
he is fantastic. He is that. That's the thing is we got in 1985 we got two rad featured zombies. We got Bub and we got Tarman.
Yeah.
And both of them are just fantastic. Bub is such a great character. Uh, Sherman Howard, I think is his name,
Mhm.
as the actor. He's fantastic. He's so good. He's so expressive.
Yeah.
It's like watching like a toddler interact with all the stuff that like all the people around him and all the stuff that he's given. He's such a great character. Like right down to the end, like when like things are starting to come apart and like his chain comes loose and
Yeah.
he takes the chain and instead of just like shambling out into the facility, he goes to Dr. Logan to like show him like, hey, my chain's loose, you might want to fix this. And unfortunately
Right.
Logan is dead at that point. But yeah, like you kind of feel for him in that moment because like you see him react to it.
Hmm.
uh yeah. I'm
Well,
also
there's shades of there, and I'm sure this was intentional since they call Dr. Logan Frankenstein throughout the thing. There's kind of shades of like Boris Karloff's Frankenstein monster.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
he's almost like a misunderstood, like,
yeah,
because like
he's
his
processing
situation,
things. Yeah.
yeah, like his situation isn't entirely his fault. Like he's just the violence of the zombies is just instinctual. So you can kind of understand him a little bit. And the fact that we
Hmm.
spend way more time with this one zombie than we do most of the most of the cast.
Right.
Uh, it really kind of helps you. It really kind of helps you appreciate that character more than you normally would.
Yeah, I
He's
mean, definitely an all-time great zombie, and you do
Yeah,
spend a lot of time with him, and you really get a good look at him, which is great because he
yeah,
looks
he's
great.
a
He's very
great.
expressive,
That's
and
the
he
thing,
has
man.
like,
I don't know what
yeah,
happened on this movie, but like Tom Savini had upped his game so hard.
yeah,
It because he's a very very talented special effects guy, but like some of his stuff is really kind of shabby. But up at this point, the look like the makeup on the featured zombies is amazing. The like on camera effects that he's doing are so detailed and so gross. It's
yeah,
like it is such a massive step up from everything that he had done on Creepshow.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. But Creepshow is supposed to look like a comic book drawing too.
yeah. I mean, even the stuff in Creepshow is really good too.
I thought
Um,
so, yeah.
yeah,
But it was supposed to have that comic booky like unreality quality to it. I think, you
right.
know.
Right. But like, like there's certain things like the makeup he did. And I mean, granted, Friday the 13th is like 5 years prior. Some of the stuff in that is very rubbery, and you get a too good a look at some of the mannequins as they're getting killed, and it's like,
Yeah.
maybe they should have cut away a little sooner. But by this point, like, he is firing on all cylinders, like this stuff. And I think that Nicoteros and Howard Berger also worked on this movie as well. Like the two guys, the K and the B and K and B, or the N and the B rather. Howard Kurtz didn't have anything to do with this one, but like I think they were the ones who sort of brought the kind of the fact that like when the zombies actually rip and tear in this one, there's like tendons that pull and stuff like that. Like I
Yeah.
believe that was their creation. So
Yeah, and I had a note here like more faces getting ripped than you usually expect to see. Like
I know, because like you go back like 8 years for Dawn of the Dead, and like it's like Romero always has that sort of feeding frenzy scene in it, but like this time, like it is just the quality of it, the detail. I think one of the reasons why I like this movie as much as I do is just because of how colorful it is, and particularly how gory it is, because it is
yeah,
a huge step up. Like Dawn of the Dead's got some real nasty scenes, but like this, the feeding frenzy at the end of this one, the very first time I saw it, like after the movie was over, I was like spending the night at a friend's house, and like the movie ended, and we like shut the lights out, went to bed, and like it kind of haunted me for a little while. Like
yeah, yeah,
I'd never up to that point seen anything like this.
yeah. I mean, the scene where Rhodes gets his due is
Oh,
really just. I mean, it's hard to beat that in any movie, any horror movie. It's just like one of those. I
oh
watched it and I
yeah.
was just like cheering for my couch, like yeah,
Oh, he's such a shithead. He's the absolute worst. He's just so evil. Then when he gets ripped apart, like you're like, yes, he's Joe got him.
well,
As
the
he's
expression on his face when he opens the door and it's just dozens of
and
zombies.
he's like,
Yeah, and then
right. I
Bub's
think
saluting is
yeah,
just
my favorite one of those, like of those kind of big hero kills in that one is the death of Torres. And he's the first one to go, because he starts screaming as they pull his head off, and the scream continues. It shouldn't do that, but the pitch gets higher and higher and higher because they're pulling his vocal cords.
oh wow,
Yeah.
yeah. Wouldn't it get lower though?
If they got tight now, the sound. I mean, this wouldn't happen at all. I mean, if we're being honest, but like it's like tightening a guitar string.
Yeah, okay,
the tension makes the pitch go higher.
that's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, yeah, you're right. But yeah, we're talking about the physics or the acoustics of a stretched esophagus when your head's getting pulled off.
Yeah.
But
It's God, that's such a great one. Fucking poor Rickles. You see them like rip at his eye, and the whole thing just like pops. It's so gross. It's just
it's so
so
gross.
fucking gross. As he's
Yep,
laughing, laughing his ass off as they kill him.
yep, yep. That's all he's got. Well, I mean, and it's beautiful too because this is all just this is a revenge kill from the guy that's traumatized at the very beginning. The guy that's been traumatized the whole movie.
Right, Miguel. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and you got the sense that he was never treated well by these guys anyway because
Oh
they're
God, no,
all
they're so
being
racist.
racist and just yeah. So so yeah, I mean the fact that he brings the lift up and lets all the zombies in to feed on him and then lets all them down
Yeah,
it's like into the facility. It's pretty
it's
great.
it's poetic.
Yeah, yeah. Um, we skipped over two of the characters in here as well that we see right at the beginning and that spend a lot of time in the movie doing nothing at all. And then,
Right, right.
which is yeah, the
Is it?
pilot
It's
and the radio operator.
Yeah. Is it John and Philip? I can never remember those guys' name. I don't think they ever really say their names. They're just
Uh,
the drunk radio op and the
yeah,
pilot.
I think the radio operator they just call McDermott. They call him by his last name.
Okay, yeah. Because
Yeah,
he's the most gigantic Irish stereotype you've ever seen.
yeah. Well, that confused me because I had to. I really had to question it. I'm like, is he supposed to have an Irish accent? Like, I couldn't put it together the whole movie. I looked him up. The actor's name is like Jarlath Corey or something like that.
Yes, it's
I
yeah.
can't read my own writing. I made a note, um, but yeah, I mean, I think he's clearly supposed to be like oh, I'm Irish, you know, like
Yeah, because
I
oh Jesus, Mary and Joseph, he's constantly always crossing himself.
yeah,
He's got a flask with whiskey in it all the time. Like it's like Jesus Christ, take the foot off the gas just a little bit.
but he doesn't. I don't know. It didn't sound like a convincing accent to me. It seemed like sometimes it was there,
I
and then
know, and the
sometimes
thing
it
is
wasn't.
I don't know if I've ever seen him in anything else, so I couldn't tell you if it's real or not. His name certainly sounds European, so maybe.
And he's kind of wild-eyed too. He's got really quirky expressions.
Right, right. And then we've
Um,
got our maybe he's Jamaican, maybe he's Haitian, the pilot of the helicopter, which really kind of flies in the face of these very similar characters in other Romero movies where he's put them sort of
mhm.
front and center. You know,
But
Dwayne
they're the
Jones.
reasonable ones,
Yeah, like
you
Dwayne
know.
Jones and in Night of the Living Dead, and we've got Ken Faree and in Dawn of the Dead, like these these African American characters who are sort of like in control and they're very assertive, and like this guy is just like, yeah, I just want to get the fuck out of here. I want absolutely nothing to do with this place. Which, like, I don't know
Yeah,
if he did this sort of like knowingly or what, but yeah, it's a weird choice given the sort of the legacy of these Romero zombie movies.
yeah, and they basically have like a weird little RV set up inside one of the caverns.
Yeah, yeah,
And
they live like a couple.
yeah,
They're like the odd couple.
and yeah, they just sit there and wait until somebody needs a helicopter or a radio. And since there's no one to get on the radio, like the radio operator's job is now just to sit and drink.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, I suppose it does make sense. Like if this is your job and your equipment doesn't work and you haven't reached anybody in like in months, I mean, what else are you gonna do? You're
Right,
surrounded by cases of booze.
right, right. I mean, so I mean, their plan, I guess, was to leave and land on an island somewhere and just live out their days there. But you'd think he's going to run out of booze eventually.
Right. It is a finite resource.
You better learn how to make like coconut wine or something.
Right. Right. Yeah. Again,
um,
given the way that this movie ends is also very unusual for one of these zombie movies, because like Night of the Living Dead ends. Sorry if you've never seen it. And no, there are no survivors. His original plan for Dawn of the Dead was also to have no survivors. As a matter of fact, according to Tom Savini, they shot an ending where um God, now I'm blowing. I'm forgetting his name, but Ken Faree's character Peter
yep.
you know, he goes and he waits in that room and the zombies overrun him and they kill him there. And then Fran waits for him in the helicopter with the blades turning and the zombies all climb up the ladder like they do at the end of the movie. And instead of like him sort of like coming to his senses and joining her and they get in the helicopter, she leaps up and gets killed by the helicopter blades.
Oh God.
And so yeah, like the ending, and it's almost like they had to sort of like force Romero to kind of give you at least a glimmer of hope of some kind of for that one. And so this movie is just like, oh, well, they get away and they live happily ever after on this island where there doesn't seem to be any zombies.
Hmm. Yeah, and one wonders though, how safe would you be? Because the
I
zombies
know.
probably could walk underwater,
Well, if you've
like
seen what is it, Lucio Fulci's zombie, yeah,
right.
man, they swim.
Yeah, and that's exactly what I was referring to because it has
They,
one of the single best scenes ever filmed where a zombie fights a shark, and there's
it's
also a topless snorkeling woman involved
yep,
watching the whole thing. Yeah, I
it's the
mean,
best.
what else do you need? Zombie versus shark, and also
They give you they give you the total package in that scene.
thank you, Lucio Fulci. Now that was kind of like the Italian version of, wasn't that like the Italian Dawn of the Dead, pretty much?
So
Zombie two,
it was
or
sold in Italy as Zombie 2,
right,
because in Italy Dawn of the Dead was called Zombie. And
right.
so the way like the way that the Italian film industry works, like you can just do that. You can just like imply that your movie is a sequel to
Okay.
some other movie, and they do that because it's not like there's also been like movies produced over there like in the 80s that were sort of like hey, did you like the Terminator? Well, here's Terminator 2, and it's just like some completely unrelated Bruno Mattei
Okay.
like no budget nightmare. There's movies that have sort of exploited the popularity of Alien by being Alien 2, you know.
All
So
right.
so yeah, but yeah, his movie was intended to be sold as a sequel to Dawn of the Dead, despite the fact that there's zero in common. Like there's absolutely nothing, which is why when it came over here, they just called it Zombie. Because
Yeah.
nobody, if they said Zombie 2, would be like, where's Zombie 1, right?
Right. Okay. So it'd be like Troll 2.
Right. Right. Because there's also like Troll 3 and Troll 4 over there, but they're just like retitled versions of like other movies, that
All right.
just are completely they were picked up for distribution by some like unscrupulous Italian film distributor who was like, oh yeah, Troll 2 is pretty popular. We'll call this Troll 3.
Yeah.
That's just kind of
Yeah.
how it works.
Okay. Um, Now you know more about this than I, but this is something that we touched on earlier as far as like the ratings go.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like this is something that doesn't matter nowadays. I could be wrong, but I feel like ratings really don't carry the kind of weight they did, and also ratings weren't really codified in the way that they later would be at that point. Like the '80s, they were still kind of like deciding what rating meant what.
Right, because like there are PG rated movies in the 80s that are pretty violent, or they have a lot of language, or even like what is it, 16 Candles is PG and it's got nudity in it.
Yeah.
So like yeah, it's really
But I
kind
mean,
of
wasn't Texas Chainsaw Massacre PG?
no. The rumor is that Toby Hooper wanted Texas Chainsaw Massacre to be a PG rated movie.
Oh, okay. Or PG-13 then, or was
PG
that even a thing?
no PG-13 was the first PG-13 movies came out in 1984.
Okay.
I think one of them is the very first PG rated movie, or the first movie to get a PG-13 rating is called, I think it's called the Flamingo Kid. It's a Matt Dillon movie, but the first one released was Red Dawn. And the PG-13 was a direct result of Steven Spielberg kind of pushing the envelope for like
Okay.
what could get a PG rated movie. Like, the Nazis' heads all explode and their faces melt at the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but like he was such a powerful force in Hollywood that like the MPAA would be like, oh, we're giving this an R rating, and he would just go to them and be like, come on, it's me, and they would be like, fine, PG, and then the guy rips his own face off in Poltergeist, and they're like, Steven, how are we supposed to give this a PG rating? And he's like, guys, come on, E.T. just came out and it's almost $1 billion in sales,
Yeah.
So they're like that. But then, and after that, they were like, no, we gotta be a little bit more. We gotta have something between PG and R, because so many filmmakers were really kind of pushing the envelope there. But in this movie's case, Dawn of the Dead was released unrated. You can do that. Like you do not have to. Nowadays, it doesn't fucking matter, because it turns out like the direct-to-video market eventually kind of rendered that stuff moot, because when you release a movie, you don't have to submit it for certification.
Okay.
But the downside to doing that is there are certain implications that come with that. So if it's unrated, then it probably was going to get, like, in the 80s when they still gave the X rating, it probably means that it was going to get an X rating. And if it got an X rating, well, people, because of pornography, assumed that it was like a pornographic movie. And it was just like, not just like more violent than an R-rated movie, And
Okay.
so what people would do, and Romero in particular, because he knew that like, if I submit this movie, they're going to make me cut this awesome violence down significantly. And I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to compromise my vision, because like he, above it all, was a filmmaker. Like his whole thing was he got into this he kind of, like a lot of these guys in the 70s, sort of fell into horror by accident. It just so happened that he was really good at making them. But his intention was he was going to be an auteur, you know, he was going to be like Roman Polanski or Stanley Kubrick or something like that. Like that's where his vision lied. And so, you know, he just happened to make these really, really kind of gory movies. And when they were like, "Oh no, we're not going to give Dawn of the Dead an R rating. You fucking crazy? They rip a guy's guts out literally."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, you know, then fuck it. We'll just release this unrated." And the problem that comes with that is theaters, a lot of theaters, particularly in like the suburbs or in like more rural communities, they won't book those kind of movies. Newspapers won't advertise them, which and I don't know if it just changed into the 80s, but I remember looking at the movie listings in the Boston Globe like in the 80s and seeing ads for movies like Demons and Devil in the Flesh, which I believe were both released here as X-rated movies. So I mean, maybe it was just the Globe that did that, but like it was a significant problem for you if you had a movie that you just released uncertified. And then eventually, you know, movies start going to videotape, and ratings don't matter. You know, it
Right.
literally, because every video store in America, this is before Blockbuster had really kind of codified the sort of like a method for buying movies. But like every video store in America at the time, those like little shops were so hungry for to get tapes on their shelves, they just buy everything.
Yeah.
And so it did not matter if your movie was rated or unrated. And in some cases, it was better if your movie was unrated. You know, you could,
Right.
you know, you could proudly say like the Faces of Death tape, you know, banned in 56 countries. Like that was a selling point for them.
Yeah.
You know, a movie that was released unrated. That was like, oh shit, like this must be real, like this must be real hard. And because like nobody was checking IDs at a video store, like anybody could rent anything really, as long as it wasn't, you know, you weren't a kid trying to get behind the beaded curtain.
Right.
You know, so like
I
it
mean,
just,
it was a magical time. I don't remember ever going to a Blockbuster really. I mean, the independent video stores were just around, and
that's
you'd
the thing.
rather
Like
go to one of those, you know.
like a lot of our listenership, like for our pod is generally much younger than us. And so there's a lot like, and we follow a bunch of these people on Instagram, and there's a lot of like Blockbuster nostalgia. And I get that because like for, you know, people who are like just getting into their 40s, by the time that like, you know, Friday night pizza in a movie, like the only place in town to go was like Blockbuster anymore. Cause they had just taken over and choked out all the competition. But like, yeah, for us, you know, we're a little older, and our experience with the video store, which really is kind of like the driving thrust behind both podcasts, is like there was a time where like within a bike ride from our house, like where there was like 3 or 4 different like little you know, little video stores with like, you know, poor lighting and a really, really bored like teenage tenant who like just did not give a shit what like a couple of 13-year-olds were renting. So
Yeah, it was a lot like Clerks. I mean, everybody's
it
seen
really
Clerks,
was.
so
Yeah.
just Randall and Clerks, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you
Hey,
and your brother both worked at one, right? At a video
no,
store?
but we hung around.
Oh, all right.
He was like a regular at this one that was like up the street from us. He hung around there to such a point that like when they started to like cycle out posters and standees, they'd be like, "Hey Dave, you want this stuff?" And he'd be like, "Yes, I do." And like had a closet just full of like rolled up movie posters and like movie standees and like promo materials that they would send to video stores.
Oh, okay. I misunderstood then listening to your show. I had the impression that you both like at one time worked at at this local store.
No, but like thinking back, I'm like, why didn't I ever have a job at a video store? It sounds like it was awesome.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I had two. There was like one called Video Signals and one called Adopt a Video.
All right.
And
Yeah,
then there was a third that was just a porno one, the Gallo
right.
Video. Yeah, and they had classic local TV commercials, like the regional.
Oh
TV
shit, that's awesome.
Where they acted like they were the mob. And it was the most ridiculous setup, and I wish I could find this. You can find some Gallo Video commercials on YouTube.
That's awesome.
And but not the original one, which kills me. Which was this guy talking about how they have a great video selection and all this stuff. Meanwhile, there's these goons like pulling a corpse out of the trunk of the car that he pulled up in and trying to shove it through the video return slot.
That's
And like,
awesome.
for the kids listening now, this is a slot big enough for a VHS tape to go in, and you're returning it when the store is closed. But and then they turn and they say, "Hey, boss, this guy ain't gonna fit." And he would turn around and go, "Put him in there." And that was like their tagline, was just this, "Fit him in there."
No, the place we our very first when we first got a VCR in like 1983, family, we drove down to some electronics store outside of Boston that was had a sale on them. We brought them home. We got our first membership at a place in Salem called Video Paradise, and that was our place to go. And then when we moved up from there to New Hampshire. Hollywood and Vine. Hollywood East was the one place that my friend Mike and I would go after school. And I can't remember what the place was that Dave spent so much time at, but that place was owned by a guy who was a huge Star Trek fan, and he had made a Star Trek fan film about Kirk and the Enterprise crew looking for space weed, and as a result, because they were Trekkies and gigantic nerds, they had built like a screen, like a 1-to-1 Enterprise bridge.
Wow.
And when they were done with the movie, which you could rent at his video store, obviously, but when they were done with it, like he just kept the bridge set in the front of the video store.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. It was awesome. And then eventually, I think he eventually sold the place, and they were like, get this shit out of here. But
wait,
yeah.
So when you were browsing for a video, were you on the bridge, or did you just like walk through it to get?
You would like walk through it, like if you wanted to sit in Kirk's captain's chair, like you could do that. But yeah, like you.
Wow.
Pass it. Like it was a big space too, like
right.
But yeah, it was cool. It was really great.
That's fantastic, because there is a guy in like Ticonderoga, New York, that has like a recreation of the bridge in his house. And it's like this little Star Trek museum.
That's fantastic.
I've heard it's pretty cool. And Banal went there once and he told me about it. I'm like, I gotta go there someday.
If I'm ever out that way, I'm gonna remember that.
Yeah. Ever go to Lake George? It's a Fort Ticonderoga area.
Yeah.
But yeah. So
yeah, that was quite a detour. But yeah. So yeah, ultimately, the reason that going unrated was at one time definitely a problem, but I think going into the 80s, particularly by the time that this movie came out, it wasn't really as big a problem as it might have been in like 1978.
Yeah, I mean, it really seems like there's this whole maybe about a decade where distribution was going to be greatly affected by whatever.
Yeah, also like
rating
that
you got or not.
That period of the 70s also, like that's the golden age of pornography, so it kind of makes sense that like an X-rated movie might be mistaken for a triple X-rated movie,
Right. Yeah. And that's kind of when in the UK they were really cracking down on a lot of that stuff too.
Oh, sure, yeah. The whole video nasties thing is we've done a few of them. I don't think we've ever actually covered a movie that was, because there were several to the video nasties in the UK. There were several tiers, and there was a bunch of them where like if you had a video store and you were renting them, because sometimes they would do this, they would get like they would import them from like France or something like that. And they put them under the counter, and like if you got busted like renting those tapes, like you went to jail.
Yeah.
But but also there were like 2 or 3 other tiers where it was like, there was like a fine, or they would just confiscate the tape or something like that. And most of them were completely arbitrary. It was sort of like the what is it, the PMRC's like list of songs where it was like, where did you pull these titles from? Like,
yeah,
because some of the ones that were outright banned, I think like Driller Killer, which is this like Abel Ferrara movie that's like really, really grimy and gross. It's like a real kind of grindhouse nasty picture. Like you watch it, you feel a little greasy when you're done with it. But at the same time, like some of the other ones are Bloody Moon, which is like a Jess Franco movie where I think the person who hired him to make the movie was like, make me, like Halloween. And he watched Halloween and he was like, got it. And he made this movie that's absolutely nothing like, it's like a grotesque misunderstanding of Halloween is really what it is. But like, now there's really nothing terribly like offensive about it either. There's a couple of gory kills, but they kind of suck. So it's like who really knows who is sort of like pulling these titles and making lists out of them, but like it seems almost random.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel that way kind of in general about movies, where it's really difficult to kind of have any body decide what any governing body decide what has artistic merit and what doesn't, and
Oh
what's just
sure. Yeah,
tasteless and what's offensive. Like that's
you're subjecting your movie, your art to the very subjective uh uh I'm forgetting the word here. Just like the whims of like two or
yeah,
three people. They're very even today. They're like the board of the MPAA. They're very they're very guarded about that. Like you can find out who those people are, but it's just like a small group of people
yeah,
who are determining like what's going to get an R rating.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess if you have the presence of someone like Spielberg, you can kind
Oh
of
yeah, like
manipulate
if you got
that.
power,
Yeah,
like I mean, by the time that they were like, oh, we're gonna give Poltergeist an R rating, he had like something like he was responsible for like $3 billion in like
mm,
80 in like 1970s and 1980s dollars in terms of
yeah,
box office. So he could do whatever the hell he wanted. Like he released like two movies. Not well, he didn't release two movies. He released E.T. and had a very heavy hand in the production of Poltergeist. So like it's like almost like making two movies in 1 year, and both of them were enormously popular and successful.
right. And I mean that scene is legitimately disturbing, where the
That
guy's ripping
scared the
his face
hell out of
off.
me, man. I saw that when I was 10, and it it was the first time I was like, "Oh my God, I've flown too close to the sun with this one."
Right. It still bothers me if I watch it now. Like I kind of have to look away in that scene. It's just like
We just did that one. I did that one. I guessed it on another podcast, and Dave and I talked about that one with the host, and we just did that one for Halloween with our friend Sean Abley. And our whole remark about it now is like watching it as adults, it's pretty corny. But like back then I'd never seen anything like that. And I was
right.
just a little kid who was just so freaked out by it.
Well, it doesn't look real. I mean, the effects aren't the best, but
No, like it's clearly a dummy face, and there's Steven Spielberg's hands in front of it that are just like
right. Yeah. And it's like, why would you continue pulling your own face off after the first chunk came off? But yeah, that I think the unreality of it bothered me more than anything else. Like,
it's just well it is very aggressive like that because
right.
it's a sort of escalation
Yeah.
of like scary shit that happens in the kitchen, and then all of a sudden this guy is just like is he's being shown a horrible thing by whatever spirit possesses the house. It is very very intense, so there's
Yeah.
definitely something to it.
Right. Right. Yeah, I'm gonna definitely have to do Poltergeist 3 at some point. I'm
Oof.
gonna find somebody to watch that one. Is that
If you
aren't they in like
insist.
is there a tower in that one?
That's
They're
the
up in
one
like
that
a
takes
high
place
rise.
in a high rise. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I'd have to watch it again, but I just remember it being bad. That's
I
all.
saw that one in the movies. I think I saw that one in the movies a couple of times too. Like I don't know because I have not seen it in a really long time. But the last time I watched it, I was like, "What is this movie? It's terrible."
Yeah,
But
yeah.
also like I believe they kind of carried it out and finished it because Heather O'Rourke died about halfway through the production, and I think the filmmakers have said like since then they're like her family and like everybody involved was like you'd be sort of like doing her a disservice if you didn't finish this movie, and so you sort of kind of get what you get in the end, but their intentions were good at least.
Yeah. Because there was one more after that too, I think, right? For
No, the
Poltergeist
third one was
4.
the last one.
That was the last one.
There was a remake from a little ways back, and there was a cable TV show of Poltergeist.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. That's pretty good. It was on Showtime, I think.
Huh. Interesting. Okay. Did not know that. All right. So for Day of the Dead, going back into Zombieland, um, was it the only note I have on here that we didn't cover was that Romero is in the movie. He has a brief cameo as zombie with scarf. Is listed in the credits.
Yeah, of course you're gonna put yourself in your own movie. I'd do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty great because I was not able to pick that one out, but some of the zombies that come wandering in at the end of that
Are
movie, if it's just a giant,
ridiculous.
yeah, it's
They
a
are
giant crowd.
ridiculous. I was noticing it too because there's like one of the very first zombies you see sort of like shambling down the hall is a ballerina who's still
Yep,
walking on her point shoes.
yeah, and I think there's a clown zombie in there
There's a
too.
clown. There's an army guy. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of like there's a bunch of them because like in Dawn of the Dead he did the same thing where there's a couple of zombies that are very noticeable, like the nurse
Right,
zombie and the guy who kind of gets stuck on the escalator. Like you see them throughout the movie in different locations, and so like obviously he was like, well, I got to do that again for this movie.
right. And then he's like, make me up like a zombie and just throw a scarf on me, and
Oh
then
God, I
we'll
would do
just
that in a fucking second. If I made a horror movie, I would make it I would make them contractually obligated to put me in the movie as a zombie.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Apparently,
no,
they when they made the movie, they did this with Dawn of the Dead too. But like for all of the extras were paid $1, and they were also given they were given hats that said "I survived Day of the Dead." And I periodically I look at like heritage auctions and eBay to see if one of those hats ever goes up for sale. I would buy that in a goddamn second because they did that with Dawn of the Dead as well. The crew shirts were a very particular Dawn of the Dead T-shirt, and you can get those go up for sale every now and then. But
hmm,
counterfeits are very easy to find. So like Heritage Auction sells them. One day I'm gonna get one.
yeah, hell yeah, man. That would be quite the thing to own, and then probably put it behind glass or something and hang it up on the wall
Yeah, yeah,
because I can't imagine those would have would hold up too well if you wore them too much
yeah.
at this point because it was quite a while ago. But yeah. So as far as the big three Romero zombie movies, this one's on the top for you, huh?
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is, and I mean, it's really kind of hard to sort of pick a favorite. I mean, this is my obvious favorite, but like below that, I think Night of the Living Dead is my next favorite. That's a very close second. That's such a bleak movie, and it is
I,
so
it,
it is so grim.
yeah, it's on the top for me. The original Night of the Living Dead is uh, probably in my top horror movies of all time. I really love that one.
But I mean, back to that point. Yeah, and so Dawn of the Dead would be a very also like would be a very close third, but like they switch positions every now and then. But
I feel
man,
like Dawn of the Dead almost like hasn't aged as well. Like it feels like it's got kind of it came out in the 80s, huh?
it came out in '78, and
78. Okay, because I feel like it has a very disco era feel to it.
and the thing is that like now in the age of like 4K, like UHD presentations, like you can really see how shabby the makeup is.
Yeah, a lot of it's like blue tinted and kind of weird
Yeah.
looking.
They
Yeah,
intended it was intended to come off as gray.
yeah,
But like once the film was, once the negative was developed, it kind of looks blue. And so like it just doesn't look as good. It really kind of wears
right.
its budget on its sleeve. The black and white in Night of the Living Dead really works in its favor, despite the fact that like even the cheapest, like the crappiest horror movies at the time, like Herschel Gordon Lewis movies were coming out in like glorious Technicolor. So
Yeah,
here comes this movie in black and white, but it really works in its favor because it's like a real kind of high contrast black and white on top of it all,
right.
and it
Yeah,
really it
and
goes to
ominous scenes.
yeah,
Like
because there's a couple of shots like there's one where they're running through, they're trying to seal the house up, and um like Barbara is just kind of like catatonic in the kitchen, and Ben goes to like fight the zombie off and push him out of the house, and like the zombie gets like knocked back and the camera sort of pulls back, and all of a sudden there's like seven zombies behind him that just kind of
yeah,
like emerge from the darkness. It is, despite the fact that it's got this name and this kind of reputation for being sort of like a schlocky drive-in movie, like it is a very sophisticated horror movie. Like we just did there's an episode that's coming out. I don't know, it might coincide with the release of this one, but like the one that we did on that one is like a like deep examination of that movie because oh
Well, I
man,
know
it is
we're
such
getting
a
ready to yeah, we're getting ready to record this, and I listened to your episode on Blackula, and you mentioned that you're going to be doing doing the Night of the Living Dead. And I'm like, I think it's going to come out right around the same time as the Day of the Dead episode, so that'll be kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's so it's so easy to forget that the movie really is. I mean, it's extraordinarily well made. It was kind of like a low budget movie for its time, obviously, but like, ooh, it is so well made. It is so pessimistic. Um, it's just I'm like maybe I prefer that one just because like if Day of the Dead, in all of its like cynical Reagan era glory is my is my favorite one, then obviously like the next most cynical one is gonna come up in second place.
Yeah, yeah, and considering that Romero botched the copyright on the original, which meant that he just really didn't make the money off of it that he otherwise would
Right,
have.
it wasn't even him. It was the Walter Reed organization, who was the
Okay.
company that eventually picked it up. They were releasing it as Night of the Flesh Eaters, and Walter Reed was like, "We're going to change the name to Night of the Living Dead," but they didn't attack because back then, like you had to the copyright wasn't implicit. It
Hmm.
was it had to you had to show the title card on the screen. It had to have the little copyright under it, and so they just put Night of the Living Dead title card on it, but didn't copyright it. And so, whoops, you know,
Yeah.
it went in, and that movie made so much money, of which
Right.
Romero and like the Latent Image saw none of.
Yeah. But I mean, he was kind of able to make good on it with the sequels at least.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
it did. Like a year after it was released, it sort of became a favorite among the Andy Warhol crowd, and so
Hmm.
like it bought him. It didn't make him any money, but it certainly sort of like opened a door for him to
Yeah.
sort of like to
Right.
move in. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I think at that point, audiences wanted more. Eventually they'd want to see
Oh
a,
yeah,
a
it's
'70s
that
version.
movie.
Yeah.
It made in '68. Like that movie really sort of set the pace for what was going to come out in the '70s. Like I'm not sure like a movie without a movie like Night of the Living Dead that's like so relentlessly bleak. There wouldn't necessarily be like a Last House on the Left, which is kind of like
Yeah.
the preeminent early '70s like grindhouse horror movie. Because like
Yeah.
that movie then goes and sort of like kind of sets the pace for the rest of the '70s, where it's like all this kind of like brutal like lo-fi directory or
Right.
documentary style sort of filmmaking for that is until Halloween came along, like everybody was just trying to make their own version of Last House on the Left, and like I don't know if you actually got there without a movie like Night of the Living Dead, which is like, oh yeah, you could show zombies like eating guts and stuff like that. Like you can make a movie that's just like this bleak and relentless and
Yeah. And it
this
is
cynical,
graphic
and
too.
people will love it.
Yeah. I mean, my son expressed an interest in horror movies at one point. I think maybe he was like 12, and I was like, Night of the Living Dead's probably fine. Like it's
Yeah.
it's older and it's not like that graphic. It's black and white, but I kind of forgot. Like he wasn't really prepared for it at the time because they're like biting into a severed arm and then eating intestines and stuff. And
And the
he was
hero
kind of like
dies.
he was hiding his face and just kind of like I'm like, oh man, sorry, buddy. Maybe you weren't ready for this.
Yeah. Now consider this: when Night of the Living Dead was released, it got released as the B picture on a double feature with Doctor Who and the Daleks, and so they
Oh
were
wow.
sending it out to matinees for children to watch. And there is a sort of famous. It's not a review, but it's an article Roger Ebert wrote around the time that it came out about his experience of watching this movie in a movie theater full of children. And it's like like none of them knew what was coming. Like they started out like kids at a movie theater, and by the end of it, they were just like silent.
Yeah. I was gonna predict that maybe there was some crying and wetting of the pants going
I would
on.
I would imagine, because like no, they didn't make horror movies where like where all of the good guys get killed at the end.
Right. Yeah. Somebody's got to survive. Yeah.
Yeah, because that movie feels absolutely no responsibility whatsoever to reassure you as the viewer that like everything's gonna be okay.
Well,
You know?
even though, like, I mean, you say everybody's dead, but the final shot is you still have the newscaster talking about it. So
Mhm.
clearly people survived. And the final shot is like them like hanging a zombie up in the tree and like burning a pile of
Well,
zombies
yeah,
and
the
stuff.
final shot is them throwing Ben's body on the pile right before they set it on fire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they won, you kind of get the feeling that it was contained. So it's almost like this is a split timeline where one universe went into the Return of the Living Dead, where they had contained the
Oh, yeah, where
zombies
they
and
got
put
it
them in
under
the
control.
barrels. Yeah, and then Dawn of the Dead and Day of the Dead are in a variant of that universe where they didn't really have them under control after all, and
Right,
they got
right.
overwhelmed. Yeah, yeah. So it's a multiverse of Living Dead.
Take that Marvel Cinematic Universe.
The multiverse of the Living Dead coming to a theater near you. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I was glad to get some zombie talk going on here because I was getting a little tired of not talking about zombies. When I first came up with this idea of third time's a charm, I think I mentioned this in a prior episode, but I kind of assumed that I would just be doing horror movies all the time because,
Yeah,
like,
because there's not too many other like sort of genres that go this deep.
right,
And good God, that's gotta be a rough go of it too. Like, because usually by the time part three comes out, it's like, whew, we're already running out of gas here. Like Hellraiser 3, Child's Play 3, like, oh,
right.
these are not good movies.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's why I wanted I mean, that was kind of the impetus for the idea. It was just like that's that you got choices you can make when you get to the third one. If you're
Yeah.
gonna do a second sequel, it's like sometimes it's just phoning it in. Sometimes it's like where can we take this?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah,
Very few threequels ever really figure it out. Like this is one of the rare occasions. Friday the 13th part 3 is another one that like really kind
right.
of gets it right and like really starts to understand where they're going with those movies. So,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
where it starts to get good in the Friday the 13th ones, I think.
Yeah.
That's so and or you can just do something totally different like Halloween 3. So it's like
Yeah, exactly.
yeah. So but yeah, I mean up till recently I feel like I haven't had nearly enough horror movies going on. So I was like I was like, all right, Day of the Dead, it's happening. And I'm very glad that you came on to talk about it with me because I could tell that you had the enthusiasm for it, and I really enjoy listening to your shows about movies because it's just you have a lot of great insight about it and an obvious passion for the bizarre cinema and the horror and the odd choices that directors sometimes make.
Oh
So
yeah, man. Yeah,
yeah.
sometimes though, like some of the movies we do, it's like what was going on here?
Well, there
But
was that one you covered one recently about it was a musical like the
oh, the
Apple.
apple. The apple is very funny because its director Menachem Golan, who was the Golan and the Golan Globus sort of 80s canon film empire,
Yeah,
he made that movie thinking like he had West Side Story on his hands
right,
or like the Wizard of Oz. Like he was like, this is gonna take the world by storm. I got the next Grease here. And he
right.
released it and went to, I believe it was the Montreal Film Festival, where they like handed records out of the soundtrack because it's a musical to people who were there, and but like before the movie was even half over, like the attendees were literally throwing the records at the screen and people were like rolling in the aisles laughing. And he left before the movie was over and went back to his hotel room and was going had to be pulled away from the balcony because he was going to leap from it.
Yeah.
So
I mean, you told me about when you were talking about the movie in the episode. I was like, this sounds like a crazy fever dream. Like this sounds like it can't possibly be real. I had
yeah,
never heard
yeah,
of it at all. So you guys describing it, I was like, this is just a train wreck. Like I
yeah,
almost
yeah.
want to watch it now because it's so. Sounds
It's
so horrible.
it's what, just take it at face value. Just take it at face value. Just believe me, it's something. Because it's not terribly good.
Right.
There's another, we did another canon one earlier last year called X-Ray. It's also called Hospital Massacre, but it's called X-Ray. You can watch it on Tubi. It's a canon slasher movie from '82, I want to say, and it is like and again, same sort of people, like it's Golan Globus producing. It's the guy Boaz Davidson, who's their sort of like house director at the time. They hadn't really sort of broken into Hollywood proper yet, so they brought all of their sort of Israeli film people with them. It is like a slasher movie made on another planet. It is a weird, baffling misunderstanding of slasher movies, but it is really good in that it is just minute to minute. It is one of the most unpredictable movies I've ever seen. I love it. When Dave brought it to my attention, because you can get it through. There's a really great version you can get through Vinegar Syndrome. I was like, I watched something that was really short, and I was like, what? I need something to watch. What are you watching right now? He's like, I'm watching a movie called X-Ray. Watch it right now. Just drop whatever you're doing. Watch this movie. And before the movie was even a third of the way over, like I had the Blu-ray on order, and then we watched, like both of us independent of one another, watched it like twice within 24 hours. Like we had become properly obsessed with that one. That is one that we did an episode with our friends from Uike Horror, which is like the Latinx horror movie podcast, and they were just like, "What is this movie, you guys?" So highly recommend it. It's completely bonkers. It is so weird and incomprehensible. That's one that I would say, like, definitely watch that one.
What year was that that it came out?
That was 82, I think. Is 81 or 82. 82 is, for some reason or one reason or another. 1982 is like our sweet spot. Like we've done so many movies from 1982.
Right. Yeah. Just keep coming back for more.
It was a great year for horror movies, apparently. Like the whole thing, we kicked off our entire series with Amityville 2, The Possession, which I believe is also 1982. So yeah, we're just kind of like cursed to exist in 1982, which is fine with me. There's a ton of great movies that year.
Yeah, hell yeah. So in wrapping up here, where can people find you? I mean, we've been talking about the show, but I will recommend audiences definitely go check out Bring Me the Axe.
Yeah, you can find Bring Me the Axe, anywhere you get podcasts. Bring Me the Axe Horror Podcast. If you subscribe to that one, you get 99-cent rental in the same feed, but 99-cent rental also exists in its own feed. You can look that one up. You find us on Instagram, Bring Me the Axe Pod, on Instagram. Dave's got his own thing, that Queer Wolf. And and I'm on Blue Sky. You can just look up again, Bring Me the Axe on Blue Sky if you want to follow me there. I mostly just kind of complain about politics there, though. So I don't know if it's that terribly exciting. Pictures of my cat and random thoughts on whatever horror movie I happen to be watching at the time.
All right, excellent. Yeah, so I will recommend people check that out once again. And I guess we have a fair understanding of what kind of monkey farm we're running around here.
And we know exactly who's running it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bryan, for coming on, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, this is great. Thanks for having me.